how humans used the land, how humans in the past adapted and survived in this place. I became interested in this area in 2006. This area is part of the Muskegon State Game Area. A high bluff overlooking the Muskegon River Valley. A very prominent feature, separated from other parts of the landscape by a creek, two different creeks, one on the southeast side and one on the northwest side of the landform. A number of very interesting and important archaeological sites have been identified in the area. So we have been interested in trying to understand how people over the last thousands of years used the landform. One of the key sites was an earthen enclosure, which is a sacred kind of place, a gathering place. One of the reasons that we returned to this location was because of the presence of fairly large numbers of cache pits or storage pits that are indicated by surface depressions. We're beginning to reconstruct this idea that people really didn't use this landform until maybe 3,000 years ago. That's the thing about archaeology. You never get the whole answer. There are always, after every field season, more questions to be asked. My idea was to go back and examine a couple of those sites and flesh out our knowledge of the area.
I'm good.
Dig a hole. We're gonna dig a hole 60 centimeters deep, and then with each shovel, sift it out and see if we can find some cool stuff.
Yeah.
It kind of clumps together in these big dirt balls, and we just kind of try and grate them over the sifter like a piece of cheese, really. Cheese that could contain knowledge.
That's the official phrase.
It is the official phrase.
We're going to take this Munsell soil chart and kind of compare where it's at. 10YR is what we use for this environment. 2-2?
Yep, looking about 2-2. I got it. Sorry. Not all about me.
Just so it hides any disturbance, so people don't come out here and start nosing around.
Are getting ready to do another STP or a shovel test pit.
Hopefully the last transect on this line.
I was like, oh, snake! Yep, up, yeah, he's right up here against the tree.
You alright?
No, I need disability pay.
It's all organic.
No GMOs.
Gluten-free.
That's a big old piece of pottery.
Really?
Yeah,
Ooh.
that's a big old piece.
Dang.
You wanna do something good?
Yeah, a giant chunk of pottery.
Definitely feel free to do that kind of thing, but if you see it's charred on the inside, don't rub your finger on it then. So, yeah. Late woodland pottery, it's fairly thin. We can see the cord marking on the exterior, and it's smooth on the inside. And these actually have a mica in them, either in the paste or in the sand itself. And as you kind of move it around in the sun a little bit, you can see a slight shimmer.
It's got a smooth surface.
I noticed that.
And it's fairly thick. And it's got It's got, it could be late woodland. In the absence of anything else, it's got some cord marking on the interior, which also, see the little cord marks right here? That sort of pushes it earlier than the late woodland. It pushes it toward the middle woodland or the early woodland.
Oh, wait.
Yep. Alright, so what we have here, the lithic flake. It's like a lighter chert. It's not the best material for fighting tool, just because it's really, it's very thin. It is a scraper.
Scraping hide.
Yeah, scraping hide, or sometimes they would use them to carve like the smaller tools out of wood.
Jazz hands.
It is a late woodland.
Oh, you guys got some too?
Oh, there's a big one.
Interior. A couple big ones.
Where did this come from?
This came from the windows right here. This is ours, number 6. Alright. Very cool. We're coming across things.
We're finding artifacts. Over the last week and a half or so, we've been shovel testing along this line here, and I was rather surprised to discover that there seems to be another cluster of positive shovel tests. And there's a little bit of a negative space in between these two. So that, one of the questions we have is this one big continuous site, or do we have two different kinds of things going on? And then lo and behold, I was, because we kept finding stuff 100 and some meters away from the bluff edge, which is fairly far off. I was like, well, where does it stop? And so we continued shovel testing. We actually have another transect line that is out here, and it's negative all the way. So we ended up with what I think are 3 different clusters. Now, I'm not sure what they mean, interpretation-wise, but what was kind of fun and exciting was that right here, 50, 60 meters off the Muskegon Ridge and 100 and some meters off of the Mosquito Creek Ridge, we found this little cluster which included a little stone celt, which is, finding a stone celt in a shovel test is like really literally finding a needle in a haystack.
Oh, wow.
And then a bunch of pottery and some other stuff associated with it, and another really interesting kind of chopper tool. We were making jokes about it being early human because it is a really crude chopper kind of tool. So the question really is, what are we going to do to find out a little bit more? We might do some test excavation in these 3 areas to check them out.
Summertime, working mind, busy fine, man, I found coming down to you now. See you soon, stick around. Summertime, working mind, busy fine, man, I found coming down to you now. See you soon, stick around. Summertime, working mind, busy fine, man, I found coming down to you now. See you soon, stick around. Summertime, working mind, busy fine, man, I found coming down to you now. See you soon, stick around.
I guess I should point.
Snowfall in summer rain. They're like pretty flowers to my knees. Tell me something new. I shouldn't move my feet until I reach the seat of being normal. I wanna see the snowfall in summer rain. They're like pretty flowers to my knees. Tell me something new. I shouldn't move my feet until I reach the seat of being normal.
So you can see this sort of in this unit where they're mapping after they've dug their first feature level out, and you can actually sort of see how it's darker where the soil slopes down. This is an example of where we've located one of our 1 by 3 meter units over the middle of one of those depressions.
We're profiling.
Yeah, we got a lot of suspects out here, you know.
So, round, we got 14.
I'm just gonna
Root mass,
We have tested now probably, 10 different possible depressions based on not only the depression but magnetic anomalies that we got through the ground penetrating radar magnetometry surveys that we've done on the location. The results of our excavations, unfortunately, don't give us any other information other than the likelihood that what people were doing there was digging a hole in the ground, laying a fire in the bottom of the hole, most likely to drive out vermin, bugs, insects that might invade the food, and then people put food in those pits for a period of time, perhaps over a winter, to come back in the spring, the late winter, early spring, which are famine times typically in hunting and gathering groups, and pull the food out, and leaving no trace or residue that we could link to what was stored there. We still don't know. For the first few field seasons there, we were beginning to reconstruct this idea that people really didn't use this landform until maybe 3,000 years ago or so. Well, on the last day of our project, or second to the last day of our project, which is when you always find the cool stuff, we found an artifact that forces us to revise that chronology. People were there probably around 8,000 BC. Based on this artifact, it's a very distinctive style called an agate basin point that has been dated in northern Michigan and the western part of the United States to between 7,500 and 8,500 BC. It's an extremely unusual discovery for this particular area, dating to that time period, and made out of a kind of raw material that links to northern Michigan. So it raises all sorts of other questions. Why were people here at this place 8,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago? And why only this one? Is it a traded item? Was it somebody who was on a hunting expedition? It raises all sorts of really interesting questions. And that's the thing about archaeology. You never get the whole answer. There are always, after every field season, more questions to be asked. But I think, we're going to be able to say something about human use of this particular environment that no one was even dreaming about 50 years ago.